Hey everyone, this is Josh from the Gaming Manual, and in this episode of The Good, The Bad, and The Buggy, we will be discussing Mega Man 2 for the Nintendo Entertainment System. The Good. Let's start off with admittedly the best addition to the Mega Man series, the E-Tank. The E-Tank refills your energy to its maximum, regardless of how much life you currently have. As much as I enjoy the original Mega Man, having E-Tanks in it would have made it much more enjoyable for a wider audience. Not only were the E-Tanks a nice quality of life change for the game, they also became a signature item for the Mega Man series itself. In Mega Man 2, you had a max limit of 4, which was a fair amount and could help you in a pinch during difficult parts of the game or boss battles. After all, there's nothing worse than the feeling of dying during a boss fight and they only had a little bit of energy left. As for Wily's Castle, there are not a lot of E-Tanks throughout it, so it becomes a limited resource. Added with the fact that you can no longer replay levels means you can't stock up beforehand, and using an E-Tank now could leave you without one later when you might need it more. The new password screen. The password screen, yet another staple of the Mega Man series. That is until Mega Man 8, where the game switches from using passwords and goes to saving it instead. With Mega Man 2 now having 8 Robot Masters, having a way to continue meant no longer did you have to beat the game in a single sitting. Now, you could play the game until either you beat a level or got a game over, at which point you would get a password that would let you continue at a later point with the same weapons that you've acquired so far and E-Tanks. The only time the password doesn't work is in Wily's Castle. Any password you get from this point on will just put you at Wily's Castle. In part, this has to do with how the password system actually works, because they indicate whether a Robot Master is alive or defeated. I remember using the password system for the first time, and it felt like I'd discovered some kind of amazing secret in the game. It was, in a strange way, our way of proving to each other when we had beaten certain bosses. Yes, we could have used the passwords we gotten from each other to skip past bosses we may not have liked. And I never really thought of it until middle school, where I learned of GameFAQs, which had all the different passwords that you could possibly think of, and I thought, oh yeah, that password looks familiar. The Metal Blade. The Metal Blade might be one of the most powerful and most broken weapons ever created for any Mega Man game. This weapon can take out most enemies with just a couple of shots. There are a few that take an extra couple hit or two, but the fact is, you can fire in 8 directions, plus you have 112 shots. That means that this is the most energy efficient weapon in the game with the most versatility. It's very easy to replace it over your default plasma cannon. Honestly, whenever I play Mega Man 2, I always start out with Metal Man just to get the Metal Blade because of how useful it is. And not just with enemies. 5 of the 8 Robot Masters are affected by it. Woodman, Flashman, and Bubbleman all need about 7 hits from the Metal Blade, and Heatman is the only one that takes a single point of damage, same as your plasma cannon, but it does work. Metal Man only needs 2 hits from his own weapon. Typically, outside of the plasma cannon, your default weapon, bosses are immune to most weapons that aren't their weakness. And if you're new to Mega Man 2, my advice is, get the Metal Blade as soon as you can, and don't be afraid to spam it. Like I said, it's energy efficient, so those energy capsules actually refill a lot more than you think, giving you plenty of shots. The Bad. The Metal Blade. Okay, I know I just covered the Metal Blade in the good section, but it's actually because the Metal Blade is so good that by comparison, a lot of the other weapons feel useless, or at the very least, very situational, because you have no real reason, other than an enemy being immune to Metal Blade, to just simply not be using Metal Blade. Why use the Crash Bomber that only gives you 7 shots and leaves you completely defenseless until it explodes 5 seconds later? Why use the Quick Boomerang that has a very short range? Why? Oh, god, why would you ever use bubble lead that falls directly in front of you and then slowly goes to the other side? Oh, no, that's right, the final boss. We'll get to that shortly. Quickman. I personally view Quickman's stage as a forced speedrun because you are forced to try and memorize as much of the level you can during the screen transition and then try to make your way through it before being hit by a laser. It's unfortunate because I get the idea they were going for. It's a quick level, so they're trying to have you move quickly. But having these lasers instantly kill you as soon as they touch you seems a bit much. Of course, you can freeze the lasers using the Time Stopper weapon, and the stage has large energy capsules spread throughout it so you can maintain the effect while you're falling. But you don't have that knowledge playing the first time you go into the level. It doesn't help that because placed energy capsules don't respond when you die, you're better off trying to learn the pattern without the Time Stopper because you won't get a second chance to refill your energy. I feel they could have executed it better. Maybe only having the lasers do a third of your health and damage, or have the beams do damage over time while you're in contact with it. That way, if you make a mistake, you still have a chance to recover from it and make it to the next screen. Both of these effects I have encountered in ROM hacks as well as the Mega Man Maker. The levels are still challenging with them, but they're not as punishing, so it has a better feeling to it. Boobeam Trap. This is another unique idea they had, of having a boss fight where it was a puzzle and you have to dodge attacks and take out a defense system. But aside from the concept, it wasn't very well executed. It should have been called the Beginner's Trap. Only the Crash Bomber can do any damage to the boss, which can be infuriating because just a single mistake means you won't be able to beat the boss. Not only is Crash Bomber the one way to deal damage, if you don't have full energy as well, you can't beat this boss. What's worse, throughout all of Wily's castle, there are power-ups behind walls that only the Crash Bomber can break. And if it's your first time playing the game, you won't know that. So you're gonna use the Crash Bomber to get these power-ups, or it feels like you get soft lock in this room just waiting to die. This boss fight can be one of the most discouraging parts of the game if it's your first playthrough. Unless you're following a guide, you won't know what the boss is weak to, so you'll have to try to find out its weakness while dodging its attacks, making sure that you have full Crash Bomber energy when you do find its weakness. The final boss. The final boss itself has a couple of problems, and the biggest one for me is the false positive or false indication that the boss takes damage from the plasma cannon. In a normal case, if a weapon is ineffective, it bounces off the boss and makes a single high-pitched ding. This lets you know that the current weapon does not work. With the final boss, if you use your plasma cannon, the bullets disappear, and they make the striking sound, but it's the striking sound of a successful hit. The next problem. If this is your first encounter with the boss, you're gonna try every weapon but bubble lead, because the enemy is airborne, flying around the screen in a figure-8 pattern. Bubble lead drops straight in front of you, so it's not intuitive as the first choice for this boss. When you do find out that the boss is weak to bubble lead, you then have to figure out the timing before you run out of E-tanks and, more importantly, weapon energy. Also, getting hit by a bullet takes about a fourth of your health, but touching the alien body itself will take about a third. Remember before when I said I'd come back to bubble lead in the final boss? Well, here's the issue. You have no way to refill your weapon energy once you get to this point in the game. There's no enemies, so if you run out of bubble lead, you're not going to be able to actually beat the game. And continuing within Wily's castle does not refill your weapon energies, so now you just get soft lock, unable to beat the game. There's nothing worse than getting to the final boss and then not being able to beat the game because it became unbeatable simply because you didn't know that you needed to have a certain weapon and a certain amount of energy for said weapon. This and the previous boss is why most of my friends haven't actually beaten Mega Man 2. Just like in the first Mega Man 2 also has a pause glitch, but this time it resets the game's counters that are tracked within the code. Every time the game is paused, the counters are reset. What are these counters, you ask? Mega Man's fall speed, part of Woodman's boss pattern, and weapon shots, just to name a few. For Mega Man's fall speed, you gain speed and fall faster over time. The spike fall in Wally's castle, right here, is a perfect example of this. This is also a perfect example of when you pause the game, it sets it back to 0, and then you can move left and right for a few frames before the speed starts to build up again. Using this, you can safely fall down the spike fall here without having to worry too much. This can help a lot in those long falls, but just make sure that you don't pause during Quickman stage, as your speed will reset and you won't fall fast enough and you'll die to those lasers. As for Woodman, when Woodman jumps during his boss pattern after firing his leaf shield, there is a counter to let the AI know to resume the pattern where he lands. But pausing when Woodman is airborne will reset this counter and cause him to jump again. There's not much for this glitch other than getting to see Woodman jump all over the place. The weapon shots also have a counter when they use less than 1 pip of energy. For example, Quick Boomerang, you can fire 7 shots before a pip is used. If you pause the game before the weapon count matches, no energy will be consumed and the count is reset back to 0. So for some weapons, you can have almost infinite energy if you pause the game. This glitch works on the following weapons: Quick Boomerang, as long as you pause before the 8th shot; Metal Blade, as long as you fire before the 4th shot; and Bubble Lead, but only if you pause after every shot. Weapon priority. Mega Man 2 has some strange weapon priorities. For example, Time Stopper, if used in Mega Man stage before entering the screen with these wolves, they won't teleport in and you can run past the areas just fine. But if you pause after transitioning onto the screen, they'll be stopped mid-teleport and you'll be stopped by an invisible wall until you run out of energy. This also works on the boss dragon in Wily's Fortress, but as you can see, contact here is a lot more lethal. Woodman's shield also takes a strange priority over other sound effects. If the shield is active when you finish a level, it will actually drown out other sounds that should be playing. Now the strangest weapon priority is that the weapons have a higher priority than the pause button. Have you ever noticed that when you fire a weapon, you can't pause the game until the weapon is no longer present? You have to wait for the effect to no longer be present before you can pause the game. This may not be a glitch, as it does look intentional and a side effect of having a menu on the same screen as your gameplay, but it does feel a little off once you realize it. Memory overflow. There are 4 stages that I have personally found that this glitch works on. The idea is to cause a memory overflow so that you can warp to a different section within the game. The easiest way to take advantage is to try to get the slowdown effect when there's too much stuff on the screen. This is a pretty good indication that the memory is starting to reach its peak. So if you add more, it's going to get to the point where it floods the memory and then you're going to get warped or teleported to a different Wily stage, where the layout is mixed in with whatever current stage you're from. When you're successful, you'll be teleported to one of Wily's stages, but with the layouts from the current stage. Bubbleman, Woodman, and Airman can all achieve this using item number 1, as you'll see here. But for Heatman, you'll need to use Bubble Lead, and it's a little harder to pull off. For the first 3, just use item 1 3 times, and then get near the boss gate and try to run against it. When the boss attacks, the game should slow down, and this should trigger you to be teleported to the Wily stage. For Heatman, fire 2 bubble leads towards the boss. When the first one hits, and before he attacks. Jump against the boss gate. It's going to take some time to get it right, but doing this will cause a memory flow because it's going to try to process the 2 bubble leads, the boss taking damage, and the flames that get shot out. When the first bubble lead hits the boss, the game should slow down and then trigger the effect, warping you to the Wily stage. Mega Man 2 is a decent experience that I think any fan of retro games would enjoy. It does have some problems, but it is one of the better known games in the Nintendo collection, not just within the Mega Man series itself. If you look past Quickman stages and those last 2 levels, it can be a really good game with a lot of fun. Hopefully, by offering some insight into aspects of this game, it'll provide a better gaming experience for newcomers to the game. This is Josh from the Gaming Manual. If you liked what you saw, hit the like and subscribe button if you haven't already. Let us know of your opinions in the game in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next video. The boss is called Boobeam Trap. I'm gonna that up. Just take it from an earlier cut, please.